question is that a lot of people ask, and it's actually one of the most common questions and one of the biggest obstacles for most startups, is that startups must invest 1 billion Vietnam dong, which is about 44,000 US dollars, to register a company in Vietnam. So maybe Moraine, would you like to start again with this myth?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right, Barney. I think it's a question we hear the most, maybe.
Yeah.
And people who approach us with Bizland or in Bizspective, often they throw all kind of numbers around. They've heard they cannot start a company in Vietnam if they invest less than 500 million Vietnam dong, or 1 billion, or 3 billion, or 30 billion. All kinds of numbers. So I think it's fair to say that there's quite a bit of confusion about this topic. So it's good to discuss it here. And let's maybe start with the legal basis first. So what is legally required in Vietnam when it comes to the investment capital? I think many people will be surprised when they hear that the law is mostly silent about that. It does not say anything often about what is the minimum required capital in order to register a business. Now, there are some exceptions, for example, real estate trading, or if you want to invest in tourism. But in most cases, the Vietnamese law does not say anything about what is the minimum required capital in order to start a business. However, more practically speaking, and maybe that's how you can understand it a little bit better, if you think of a company as a separate legal entity. So you as an individual, you can start a company, but that company also needs money to survive, to pay its bills, to grow. And maybe you think, well, as the owner, I just put in money whenever the company needs it. I pay it out of my own pocket, for example. But then remember that a company is actually a separate legal entity. It's separate from the owners, and it has its own money. So in fact, every company, also in Vietnam, it needs money, it needs capital. It needs capital to start with. So when you register a company in Vietnam, you have to register and contribute an amount of starting capital. So one way to approach this, to think how much money does the company need, is to think how much money is the company going to spend in the first, let's say, 9 to 12 months after incorporation, at a period where there is maybe not so much revenue yet. If you have calculated that amount, what you need in the first, let's say, 9 to 12 months of incorporation, then you divide that amount between your partners, your business partners, if you have them, and then you have 90 days after the date of incorporation to contribute that money to the company. And from that moment on, the money belongs to the company. Now, another practical note is that the Vietnamese authorities, they expect you to come up with a realistic amount of capital. So sometimes foreigners approach us with a business plan, and then they say, we're going to invest, let's say, $1,000 or $2,000. From practical experience, I can tell you that the authorities, the Vietnamese investment authorities, will probably not approve your project in that case. They want to see a reasonable, a realistic number, a realistic amount of capital that you're going to invest into the business. And with that amount of capital, your investment project should be feasible. So it should be reasonable, realistic. So if the authority who needs to approve your project thinks the amount is reasonable, it makes sense, it makes the project feasible, then you will get your approval. But if they think that it's not enough, then they may not approve it, and they may ask you to increase the capital first and try applying again.
Mm-hmm. And I think also there are maybe some other variables. So that's definitely right. And maybe the government or also the DPI, Department of Plan and Investment, are thinking potentially some foreigners are opening businesses like a shell company, as it happens all around the world, just to obtain long-term visas. So I think this is another maybe point in the thought process of the DPI, which generally does raise the investment capital a little bit further, as we've seen in Da Nang and Hoi An specifically.
Yeah, that's true.
And maybe Ho Chi Minh cities, it's a little bit less there, and Hanoi also, but central Vietnam and the cities there, it seems to be slightly higher, I think, due to this reason.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another point. It also depends on the place where you want to register the business, and maybe that Simon later can say something about that. But it's true. For example, in Ho Chi Minh City or in Hanoi, the capital requirements are usually a bit lower than they are in, for example, Da Nang or Hoi An.
Yeah, exactly. And also maybe another thing to keep in mind. So with the capital, you can use this capital for costs. So obviously for the office and maybe even like a staff night out or something. So you can use this capital to spend on costs. And another thing to keep in mind, the capital of the business will be located in two places. So one will be the company bank account. And second of all, it can be in cash reserve. So they're both under the company. You can withdraw it from the company bank account into cash. And essentially you can use that cash for buying anything that you may need. But on paper, that cash is still in the company. So if you have an audit, which can happen, normally it's yearly, but sometimes for some businesses, it could take 2 or 3 years. You might have an audit. And in this audit, you must be able to present the cash that is in the company. So let's say if you withdraw quite a bit of that cash and you use it, if you get the audit, you must be able to present that cash. Okay, so maybe Simon, would you be able to tell us about like the different locations and maybe business lines, which amount is required in regards to investment capital?
Yes, like Marine said, the laws almost say nothing about the minimum capital for when setting up a foreign-owned company. Yeah. In practice, the licensing authority, I mean the DPI, they will verify your client's application, based on many factors like business lines, location of registration, project size. In Ho Chi Minh City, when setting up IT consultancy, import-export, wholesale trade companies, we always recommend the minimum capital be around 10,000 USD only. If they don't want to invest more than that, we usually recommend that amount.
Yeah.
As you said, in the same cases, in the DBI in Da Nang City or Hoi An City, they require the amount a bit higher.
Yeah.
In Hanoi City, the same.
The same with Ho Chi Minh, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
In terms of this, Ho Chi Minh City, in Ho Chi Minh City, the DBI here is I see is more flexible in terms of the capital.
I think.
So maybe let's go back to the question that we are dealing with now. Do you always need to invest 1 billion Vietnam dong to register a company in Vietnam?
No,
the short answer from my side is no, you do not. And I see that Simon agrees with that. So in that case, I would say that this myth is busted as well.
Yeah.
With a little bit more nuance, a bit more details, I would say it depends on your specific business plan. For example, which field of business do you want to be involved in? Or where in Vietnam do you want to register your company? As Simon explained, it's lower. The capital requirements are lower in Ho Chi Minh City than, for example, in Da Nang. But also, what is the size of your project? How many investors are involved? Do you want to sponsor somebody with an investment visa? So, generally speaking, my first recommendation is to estimate how much money your company will actually need in the first 9 to 12 months of incorporation. Because that's a time you usually do not have a lot of revenue yet. So the company needs some starting capital. And the second point, the second recommendation I would make is speak with your lawyer or your service provider who's helping you to register the business, because they know exactly how it works in the place of registration, what the authorities approve, what they don't approve. Those would be my two recommendations.
It's easy for me to advise the clients on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So I think myth number 2 is definitely busted there. You don't need to invest $1 billion.